Well, hello! Welcome back to my channel. Joshana here, still in the baggy sweatshirt, to talk about some friggin' books. Kind of a lot of books. So, I've been seeing people doing their, kind of wrap up of the decade and their like favorite and least favorite books of each year and everything. And I was like, man, I can't really do that because I only really started, I had a Goodreads account for many years, but I didn't really use it until I got on BookTube. That's really when I started heavily using Goodreads. So I was like, I can't remember the fucking books I read, right? My dumbass, because I totally started slacking on this year, forgot that I keep a fucking notebook of books that I read every year as well. So I have Goodreads, I have my spreadsheet, and then I have these little notebooks. And these notebooks are very brief. It's just the title, the author, and like maybe a sentence or two about the book, right? In recent years, since joining BookTube, I started also putting down my rating next to it, except like I said, this year I started slacking, and I only wrote the first 7 books that I read this year down, so that's gonna take me a minute to catch up on. But I found the one from prior years, and it's from 2009 to 2017, which is when I started my BookTube channel. So this is basically my pre-BookTube, end of the decade favorites and least favorites. And there's quite a few, guys, because it's a whole fucking decade. I am not necessarily going to go into detail for these synopses. Some of these I don't even fucking remember what the book cover looks like or anything. So going back to 2009, a couple of my favorites and least favorites. The very first one, Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. I did not like it. I wrote, difficult to get into. Heroine was lame. Ending was ridiculously anticlimactic. So I didn't like that. But then Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, I fucking loved. It was my first time reading it in 2009. And 2009 is when I first read Sookie, Dead Until Dark by CHARLAINE Harris. Now I'm addicted. Entertaining and easy read. 2010, Joshana liked Nicholas Sparks. And Dear John in particular. I wrote, saddest story of my life. I cried about 3 different times. And I remember going to see that movie and being so fucking pissed at the ending because they changed it drastically and it was not nearly as sad, and they fucked it all up, man. I hated that ending. One that I didn't like, Waiter Rant by Steve Dublanica. He was trying too hard to be clever and witty, I wrote. Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Great, beautifully written love story. The Great Gatsby, this was a reread, but I put a tab on it. 2011, The Hunger Games. This is when I fucking binge read The Hunger Games like crazy. Within a few days, I read all 3 books. Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen. I have not read this in a long time, obviously, but I just remember really liking it, and I wrote, great story, very well written. I felt very connected to the characters. Also in 2011, though, The Earth Hums in B Flat by Mary Strachan. I just wrote, okay, I figured out who the killer was early on, and I just have a memory of really not liking that book at all. This one, I have a memory of really hating. I think it was a mystery, Don't Breathe a Word by Jennifer McMahon. And I wrote, interesting at first. Then, once the mystery was revealed, it got strange and muddled. The ending was infuriating and super weird. I literally don't remember a goddamn thing about that plot. I just remember that I hated that book. And then, in 2011, I also read The Glass Castle by Jeanette Wells, which was one of my faves. I wrote, great memoir. I was completely sucked into the story from the get-go. 2012, we get to some books that I didn't rate at the time, but I wrote like nice things about, but when I look back, I'm like, I didn't really like it. The Shadow of Night by DEBORAH Harkness, book 2 of the All Souls trilogy. I wrote, very good, kind of slow in the middle, and then I never continued and read the next book because I just didn't fucking care. Damascus by Joshua Moore. This was literary fiction, and it was so boring. There wasn't one in 2012 that was like a fave. I didn't read nearly as much. That was also the year I got divorced and moved to Phoenix, so I was a little bit preoccupied with my life. 2013, The Paris Wife by Paula McLean. I have that right up there still. Historical fiction about the marriage of Ernest Hemingway and his first wife, Hadley. Really liked it. The Prisoner of Heaven by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. That was the first one that I read in that series. I wrote such beautiful storytelling, which I still recall to be accurate. The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I wrote fantastic book, such gorgeous imagery, in my opinion. Some others. Oh, I read, this is one where, like I said, I feel like I just was so nice. I didn't give ratings, but Mortal Instruments. I really enjoyed this book. I'm excited to continue the series. All I remember now is that I didn't really care to continue the series and that I was super weirded out by the end of the book. 2014. I have legitimately no idea what this book is. Veil of Roses by Laura Fitzgerald. I wrote written well, but I predicted where it was going about halfway through. And then 2014 is when I read Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I wrote awesome. Writing is amazing. I love Gillian Flynn. 2015, some that I did not like. The Girl Who Chased the Moon by Sarah Addison Allen. I wrote, good enough. I said the ending left a lot to be desired. Seemed forced. Insurgent by Veronica Roth. I said good plot and story, full of adventure. I found myself really annoyed with Triss, though. Her whole I'm so frightened of guns now and freeze under pressure thing seemed incredibly contrived. I do remember being so fucking annoyed by that. No idea what this one looks like. Wildalone by Krassi Zourkova. I said lovely writing and all, but this girl met barely a stranger and is immediately in love? No. Then he's completely controlling and stalkerish? Not hot. Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. Have that up there too. Loved it. Excellent narrative nonfiction. Very interesting story. Very well told. The Fifth Wave by Rick Yancey. Loved it. Interesting characters. Humor amidst tragedy and horror. Triumph and survival. I can't fucking talk. Jesus Christ. Then Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. Really liked that one. Soulless by Gail Carriger. So it was 2015 when I read that. Damn. Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. Fun, interesting story. Excited for the next book in the series. Definitely continued on. And then The Infinite Sea by Rick Yancey. Didn't really like that one. I said kind of drawn out and not really much happened. Anne and Henry by Dawn Eas. This one I was really nice, and I wrote fun, light read. Wasn't blown away by it, though. But I remember not having a great time with that. It's YA retelling of, like, Anne Boleyn, I think, and I didn't care for the characters. Oh, man, I totally forgot about this. This is a trope that I really don't like. I haven't seen it that much, though, but in Invasion of the Tierling, I wrote... she does this thing that irks me when there is a mystery. She'll have the main character be all, something flickered in my mind about mystery A, but I couldn't grasp it. And I wrote, like what? So annoying. An overly obvious way to keep suspense feels like a cheap trick. I really don't like that. When they just like tease you with like, oh, I almost remembered something. And then I went and baked a pie. I'm like, what the fuck? What Alice Forgot by Leanne Moriarty. I wrote, oops, I couldn't finish it. Skipped to the end to see how it all played out. And then I said, I think I was just overly anxious to get to the next book, which was Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. Thorn Jack by Catherine Harbour. Oh man, I skimmed a lot of that book, I remember. Yeah, I wrote, there were a lot of scenes that seemed to not really have a point. I don't remember what the hell I was saying. I got a phone call, and so my brain shorted out. Also, Station 11, Emily St. John Mandel. I wrote, great book, post-apocalypse, done a bit differently. Dug it. I need to reread that one. 2016, the first 3 books that I read for the year I did not care for, apparently. The Paper Magician by Charlie Holmberg. I wrote, meh, too tedious. Okay. The Book of Jonas, Stephen Dow. I wrote, good story, but painfully redundant, and therefore boring. Magonia by Maria Devana Headley. Oofiest of oofs. I remember that. I wrote, meh, not connected to any of it. I don't care to read the rest of the series, trilogy, whatever it will be. That was a book where I would argue borderline like objective badness. The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. Exclamation marks. I love this love story. I ache for it. My heart will be broken if Shazi and the king don't end up together. Then Serafina by Rachel Hartman. I DNF'd this one about half to 3/4 of the way through. I talked about that recently. The Demon King by Cinda Williams-Chima. 2016 was the first time I read this. I said it took me a minute to really get into it, but I dig it now. I can't wait for the next book. And I read the entire series back to back. I had to switch to orange because I ran out of pinks. Saturday by Ian McEwan. I only put a thing by this because this wasn't one of my favorite books or anything, but this book, okay, if anybody, I'm gonna talk about ASMR for a second. If anybody experiences ASMR, I do. I always did, and I never knew what the fuck it was, and whenever I tried describing it to people, they looked at me like I was a literal crazy person, because for me, it's not necessarily like taps and crinkles, but it's certain voices, certain vocal tones, and it almost always happened with customer service people. And I think it's that like very pleasant, blah, 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 like tone that they're talking in, and just certain ones I would just be like, ah, have all the little tinglies all over, you know, and give me like this warm feeling in my chest. And people just always were like, bitch, you sound insane when I would describe this. And no one knew what the fuck ASMR was. I didn't either. But that's what it was. My entire life I've been experiencing that. And this book gave me ASMR. Like, I'm not even kidding. I was reading this book and I just felt that, like, I just had the tingles and everything just from this one particular scene. And I don't even know what it was about it. It was just weird. And so I liked the book for that. I also liked the book. But The Wizard Heir by Cinda Williams-Chima. This one I DNF'd. Couldn't finish it, not into it, didn't care, is what I wrote. This was book 2 in the Heir Chronicles, and yeah, I decided to stick with the 7 Realms and the Shattered Realms from Cinda Williams-Chima. ACOTAR also. I'm not one of those people who didn't like ACOTAR and had to like push through that to get to ACOMAF. I fucking loved A Court of Thorns and Roses as well as A Court of Mist and Fury, but I definitely liked A Court of Mist and Fury better. Because, oh man, just my heart. A negative one, The Star-Touched Queen by Rashna Choksi. Beautiful language and a lovely magical world, but a plot that kind of fell apart for me. It felt contrived and rushed. I very much remember that. I wanted to love it so much because, guys, I did really like her. The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. That's when I read that. And I really liked it. Tell the Wolves I'm Home by Carol Rivka Brunt. I said, it was okay. I didn't love it. Good writing, but annoyed with the main character a lot. No kid is like that. Let the Sky Fall by Shannon Messenger. I said, meh. The magic was confusing and messy. Love story, blah, and not believable. Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. I said, nice. My number 2 for Gillian Flynn ratings. Gone Girl is still number 1. Eon by Allison Goodman. Also another meh. Partway through, the plot became incredibly contrived, I felt. There were 100% obvious signs that the main character conveniently missed. I skimmed the final chapters. 3 Dark Crowns by Kendara Blake. Took a minute for the action to pick up, but I didn't have trouble staying interested. Huge cliffhangers, and I starred it as like one of my favorites, and then I did not continue. Here's another one. Truth Witch by Sarah Denard. Very good. Love the characters, and the world building was great. And then I read the second book, and then I didn't continue, but I want to. And then we get into 2017, which is when I started on the booktubes, so I won't get into that. There we go. I don't know. I hope this was at all interesting for you guys. For me, it was just a walk down memory lane, a little bit of nostalgia for you. I also had a Twilight in here that I almost marked as like hated. But, you know, I can't say that I hate... Well, I've only read the books once. The movies, I'll watch those movies. If those movies are on TV or whatever, I'm like, hey, cool, Twilight. I don't love it, but, like, it's entertaining. It's an entertaining-ass little story. But the books I read, and I did not like the books. But I didn't include it because, I don't know, I didn't want to shit all over Twilight. This has been a pretty good reading decade for me, I would say. 2008 is when the end of 2008, so like December 2008 is when I graduated from college. So 2009 and on is really when I was able to start reading again, because those 4.5 years that I was in college, I really was only reading books for school, and some of them were literature, because I have a writing major and I took a lot of English classes, but I definitely was not heavily reading for pleasure. So this is it, you know? And I wish I did this when I was a kid. I really do. I get so mad because I still own a lot of my childhood books and books that I loved as a kid. But I mean, I used the fucking library so much as a kid. Like, we didn't have a lot of money, so I couldn't just buy all the books I wanted. So I used the library at school all the time. We used the library in town all the time. Summer reading programs were my shit. And it was like an event to come into town and whatever. So I really wish that I had kept a list of books that I read when I was a kid. And especially because I read so many. I just always had a fucking book in my hand. And yeah, I don't remember. As always, thank you so much for your time. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.